You want to sell your practice for the most amount of money you think somebody's willing to pay for, right?
What are some of the operational and financial metrics that these owners should be thinking about as they're starting to think about possibly an exit? What are the things they should do now to start getting ready?
You want to make sure that you are.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to Office Hours with Marti Law Group. Very excited today to have somebody join us that we've been trying to make it happen for a while, and it's about 98% my fault that it took so long. But finally got Chris Hubble on with us from Lux Med Transition Strategies. Chris is the founder and CEO of Lux Med, which is making moves in the wellness and aesthetic space as far as brokering practices. I'd love for Chris to give us a bit of an introduction, but I've gotten to know him over the past couple of years and done some work together. He's been outstanding. His team is great. And similar backstory. We'll talk a little bit about it coming up here, how we made the shift from dental into the aesthetics and wellness space. But first and foremost, Chris, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad you had me on. I'm excited. Glad we can finally get it done.
But it took a little while, a lot of rescheduling, all my fault. But I'm glad we're here, man. And thank
Absolutely.
you so much. So to kick us off a little bit, you've got a super interesting background. I guess first tell us a little bit about Lux Med Transition Strategies, what you're doing now, and then I think we can go backwards a little bit and explore our similar paths to this space.
Yeah, absolutely. So LuxMed is a M&A advisory firm helping sellers in the medical aesthetic space go to market. So in layman's terms, we help groups that want to sell their business. We help them find the right partner and make sure that they maximize the value of the business that they've created. They've built a baby, they built a family, and they want to make sure that legacy and that family is taken care of in the next round when they go to sell. So we help support them in that goal and making sure that they get the value that they want and that their team and themselves are taken care of.
That's great. Like I said, we have a similar background starting in the DSO world, for those folks who don't know, dental support organization world, back-end management companies, supporting practices. I know your Eagle Dental Management is where it sounds like you cut your teeth a bit in the dental space. So can you tell us a little bit about that, what it was, and the journey there?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it was just a random thing that I got into the dental space. My background has been in healthcare for 20 years, and I work for a group here in Dallas called Med Synergies, where we were the MSO, if you will, of large hospital-owned physician groups. So we had clients like Texas Health Resources, Catholic Health Initiatives. This was now 10 years ago, where hospitals were actually going out and buying those physician groups and making it part of the hospital, right? So they were hospital owned. And then in Med Synergies was that back office engine that billed all the claims. We did all the HR, we did all the accounting, IT. And then so my role was client success manager, if you will, where I managed one of those clients. So I managed our Catholic Health Initiatives team in Nebraska and in Omaha and Lincoln, Nebraska. So I did that for 10 or 15 years, and it was great. It was very interesting. We ended up getting bought by Optum about 10 years into me being there. And they tried to bring that acute model into the ambulatory model. And it's just not something that worked very well, or at least I didn't think it was going to work very well. Turns out I was right. But I left there and ended up in the dental space. So having all that experience running operations, I was brought on by a buddy in the dental space that wanted me to help. They had 5 offices, high Medicaid down in South Texas, and they needed a lot of support just from an operational standpoint, understanding how to run a business, 2 doctor owners. And that was in July of 2019. So you can probably guess what's coming down the road here. And so while I was there, we had close to 100 employees. We were doing 10 million plus in revenue, and COVID hits. And I ended up having to furlough the team and then laying off myself, laying off the team, laying off a number of team members. And I was working with a consultant at the time there. And I just said, hey, look, this is a very interesting space. There's a lot of consolidation happening and a lot of still fragmentation at the time. This was obviously back in 2020. And so I looked at it and said, hey, maybe this consultant guy and I can go and start this business and create a DSO to support doctors that really don't understand how to drive growth or drive revenue to make sure that they're ready for a sale at the end of the day. And so we ended up going out, my partner and I going out and raising some money from a family office. And we can get into the differences between family office and private equity, but was raise money from a family office that was in the dental space. And so we then started to buy specialty dental practices. So we were specific to the idea in 2020 was you had a lot of these DSOs that were dedicated to general dentists, but not very many dedicated to the specialty arena. And so we said, hey, our thesis will be let's consolidate periodontist and oral surgery practices, specialty practices. And so that's really what we set out to do. And we did that for a number of years, acquired a number of businesses. And we were, again, the MSO, similar to my time at Med Synergies. Our thesis was, hey, let's let the doctor be the doctor and take away all that administrative burden so that they can help take care of their patients. So we took on accounting, IT, all of those things that a doctor really doesn't like to do. That's not what they went to school to do. That's not why they started a business. And so we would take those responsibilities off their plate, again, allowing them to see more patients or treat their patients and make that the center of the focus and still have some work life balance. So did that for a number of years and then decided to exit out of there toward the middle of 24. So this time last year,
Okay.
they got into Lux Med.
So it's fascinating because I feel like our journey is again very similar. I think I've got you dated by a few years, even unfortunately. I got the wrinkles to show it. But yeah, a similar path where, our DSO had scaled up probably the late 2000s, early 2010s, and heavy Medicaid model, which is we both know now being in the space, it's just a different beast. And so we, again, fortunate to kind of exit that and found our way into aesthetics, which I'm always interested in hearing how people found this wild world of med spa, wellness practices, and all of that. So, yeah. So, how did you discover it? What kind of gave birth to Lux Med?
Yeah, so it's funny you asked that. Again, it's just one of those things where I fell into it. I actually was met with Kyle Francis, who is the founder and CEO of Professional Transition Strategies, our sister company. And so he and I just got together. We had bought a couple of practices from them on the dental side. PTS does somewhere, they do probably most dental deals out of all the advisory firms out there and are very well versed in the dental space. And so he and I just got together after I exited my deal. And I said, hey, look, would love to come on. The medical aesthetic space seems very similar to where dental was 10 years ago. It's very highly fragmented. Private equity seems to be very interested in it. You see a lot of investors that were in the dental space moving over into this space. And I said, with my background as a buyer, I could bring that knowledge and experience to the sellers and make sure that they don't fall into some of the same traps that some of these groups on the dental side when they sold fell into. And so having that experience being on both sides really, I think puts me in an advantage because I could talk to these sellers about what truly a buyer is looking for and how to make sure you find the right partner, just not the right dollar amount. But ultimately, it's a very exciting space. It's like I said, it's very fragmented. You have a lot of reoccurring revenue. You have this merger of wellness, aesthetics, plastic surgery, medicine, dermatology all coming together. And it's really, they're still trying to find their path. It's only been around for a number of years. It really blew up in 2020 with COVID and everybody moving to Zoom calls. But now I just had this conversation with Authority Magazine. There's now the focus on not just beauty on the outside, but beauty on the inside and making sure you're taking care of both aspects of that. And so that's where you're starting to see this merger together. And so I just love the space. And so Lux Med we decided that, hey, we needed really a great brand that calls out that we're in this space. And that's where Lux Med luxury medicine comes from. And really wanted to be branded as that. And so that's where we came up with the idea and jumped in head first.
I love it. I love the name too. It's an awesome story, and it is a crazy, fun, interesting space.
Yeah.
I think I don't know what you found, but we've done the primary care deals and the derm and the vet, optometry, dental, and the consolidation has been happening for a while. I feel like buyers and sellers, I should say, have gotten a lot more sophisticated and kind of understand, right? How many dentists now do we talk to when they start asking about or telling us about their EBITDA and the conversation, which I don't know if 15 years ago was happening. Do you feel like now that we're in this aesthetic space, it's new and it's young, the consolidation? Do you think sellers, practice owners, do they understand the buyer landscape? You talked earlier about private equity versus family offices. And so I'd love for you to expand a little bit on like, who are the buyers and what should folks know when they're considering, they're all probably starting to get these unsolicited phone calls about an interest to buy their practice. So do they get who the buyers are? And then if you can add on, who are the folks that they can expect?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. From my experience, the landscape is always changing, right? So, unless you're looking at the landscape on a daily basis, that buyer pool is constantly evolving. And so, I would say some feel like they have a pretty good touch on it. They go to enough conferences. You've got this space now where a lot of buyers seem to be speaking at conferences where you didn't necessarily have that in the dental space.
Right.
And it's funny, I thought I knew a lot about what I was getting myself into. Come to find out, I look at it as Wild West still. People are still trying to figure it out. And it's interesting because at least when I got in the dental space, most people seem to understand what a buyer is looking for, who some of those buyers are, what is EBITDA, what are the KPIs I need to look at. But in this space, they really are still trying to understand all of that. And so really their new groups are popping up every day and they all have different financial backgrounds, whether they're private equity, whether they're family office, whether they're self-funded, and knowing all of those different nuances, not just, okay, hey, this group has this number of practices, I think is critical that a lot of people don't think about is where is the money coming from and what are the return expectations that financial backer has to their limited partners. And so I think a lot of people will say as a seller, yes, I understand it, but is it just one layer deep that they've gone? If you go 2 or 3 layers deeper, you start to understand who these backers are and what their ultimate goals are with the consolidation that's occurring.
So when they are told, there's groups we work with quite a bit that separate themselves a bit, and when they're giving their pitch a little bit, that hey, we're a family office, we're not private equity, we're different. What is that for people who this is brand new to? What does that mean?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's a very critical distinction, the difference between a family office and private equity. So, from a family office standpoint, family office is one individual wealthy person that wants to use their own money to invest in whatever it is, whether it's the healthcare sector or oil and gas or real estate or whatever, but it's
Mhm.
their money that they're spending. They rarely, or sometimes they'll utilize debt to help expand on the amount of money that they can spend, but most likely or that they're leveraging. But the majority of it is coming from their individual wealth. Whereas private equity will go out and find investors or LPs, limited partners that will invest money into the private equity fund. And then the private equity's responsibility is to go out and deploy that capital and then giving their LPs a return on their investment within, call it 3 to 5 to 7 years. And so family offices seem to be much more emotional about the money that they're spending because it's their money, it's their wealth that they've generated over whatever background that they have. Whereas a private equity firm is much more analytical about it, less emotional. And they say, hey, we can get this X amount of return. So let's go do this and we can spend this amount of money because it's not their actual money, it's their LPs. So I think that also drives how they manage groups that they partner with. Again, one is much more emotional, one is maybe a little more corporate, but not to say either are bad or good. It's different for everybody and depending on what they want and what they want to get out of a partnership.
And I appreciate the distinction. So you've got whether it's a PE backed or a family office backed kind of group or platform, as we a lot of times call it, you've got those folks out there acquiring practices. And then you've kind of got, I want to go buy my first med spa, or I own 2 or 3 and I want to go acquire. Are there major differences that sellers should be thinking about depending upon who the buyer is?
Yeah, I think ultimately you have to look internally at yourself and say, what do I want as an outcome? And part of what I talk to a lot of our sellers about is really trying to get into their heads of what is their goal at the end of the day, because that will also determine who is the right partner for them. If they are looking to reduce the administrative burden, they don't want to deal with HR anymore. They don't want to do accounting. They don't want to do IT. They don't want to do all of that stuff. They want help with marketing. Then a group is probably better than an individual because a group is going to already have a lot of those services in place. Whereas an individual is going to come in and say, hey, I can help drive new revenue by seeing more patients or they can help support in some certain areas, but it's not going to be, hey, let's just pick up all this administrative burden and shift it over to my partner. And most individuals are either going to get their funding probably from a bank or from some sort of leveraging debt. It's just a different scenario, but I would say that it really comes down to internally as an individual what you're looking for as your outcome. And that's where we spend a lot of time with our sellers. It's just what is the ultimate goal that you want? And sometimes they don't know, right?
Right.
A part of my responsibility is to then bring all those options to the table. And what I tell a lot of groups that I talk to is you're going to figure out what you don't want. More than you figure out what you want, you're going to find out very quickly what you don't want. And
Right.
at least that then helps narrow down the groups that are going to be the right fit for them for a long-term relationship.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. I think our view on legal is a little bit different based on my operational background, and we're certainly not brokers. But when we get a client who's thinking about an exit or even starting out, I always tell them, like, start with the end in mind, think about where you want this thing to go. And it's okay, plans change, but let's have some sort of goal. And when we structure something, if they've got 3 or 4 or 5 dental or aesthetic practices, like we put a structure together, an MSO structure maybe, or a parent co and maybe some subsidiaries. But I'm always thinking about what's going to be most attractive to buyers. And I try to have them think about the same thing, even if it's not on the radar right now. It's something I did want to talk to you about. What are some of the operational and financial metrics that these owners should be thinking about as they're starting to think about possibly an exit, or even maybe it's 3 years down the road, but like, what are the things they should do now, today, to start getting ready?
No, and I do want to go back to your point on keeping the end in mind, right? I think that is a very important thing to do, an important mindset to have, even if that goal is not to sell. What is your goal at the end of the day? Yes, to your point, things change, priorities shift. But if you have a goal in mind, then you can work toward achieving that and you can put KPIs. You can empower your people with, hey, we want to achieve this. We want to get to here. The structure is also very important, especially in this space from a compliance standpoint, because every state is different. And that's really where I call the Wild West. In dental and medical, you have corporate active dentistry, the corporate active medicine, and it's very straightforward and it's very simple, with the exception of maybe 5%. Whereas in this space, it is very different. Every state is run by a different board and they have different agendas and everything like that. And so having the right structure in place, I think, is the number one thing that somebody needs to look at if they're looking to go to for an exit, right? Because the last thing you want to do is get toward an exit and you have a wrong structure and the structure can't be supported. And then you got to go spend a bunch of money to redo it because you
Yeah.
just kind of did it with legalzoom.com. And so having the right representation around making sure that your structure is set up according to your state laws and you've got the right number of medical directors, compliance bumps your multiple up. If you are compliant, it's not something a buyer has to think about. I would say is a very big positive for you when you go to market. A lot of these groups will add reps and warranties in there to exclude compliance issues, and everybody's probably got some, but making sure that you've got a good handle on that is a big one. I would also say, just from a COG standpoint, from a KPI standpoint, looking at COGS, making sure that you're in line, you're not overbuying equipment. You have a lot of equipment that is very similar, a lot of lasers that are very similar, devices that are very similar, and a lot of people will end up getting sold on multiple devices that do very
Absolutely.
similar things, right? And making sure compliantly you can shoot that laser based on your state. And so don't get sold by the reps out there for these device companies. Make sure you truly need the device and that device can generate revenue for you. The last thing you want to do is go into crazy debt because you want all these cool devices and they end up not generating any revenue for you. So looking at that, making sure, obviously there's two sides to a P&L. There's the revenue side, which is great. You got to have butts in the seat, but you also have to manage your expenses at the end of the day and making sure that those margins are in line and making sure that personnel expenses are in line, making sure you're properly staffed, not overstaffed, and making sure, even to a certain extent, a lot of these groups are doing commission plans with their injectors or their front desk staff, right? Making sure those commission plans don't just completely crush your bottom line. There needs to be an equal share of profits for everybody. You still got to make money as an owner at the end of the day instead of giving it all to the injectors. which we see often. And so I'd say looking at all of those items are pretty critical. But again, having that end in mind is very important, and making sure you understand what your goals are and where you want to be is obviously very important.
Yeah, you hit on so many great points there. I mean, our firm, we are bread and butter is M&A and doing transactions, but I can tell you over the past 2 years since really getting heavy into aesthetics and wellness, I don't know, 30, 40% of our business now, I feel like it's just compliance because we've seen it. You talked about and really hit on the head. The multiples are affected if someone's kind of a mess, for lack of a better term. And they're like, listen, we're going to have to spend a ton on legal to kind of get you guys the ship righted. We try to stay ahead of that. And it's cumbersome. It's overwhelming, I think, for a lot of aesthetic practice owners. When we have to tell them, like, you have $1 million business, $2 million, it's fantastic. Unfortunately, you can't even own it in this particular structure. And so there's ways to make it kind of work through the MSO model, but it is, it's a heavy lift that I think it's important. We start having those discussions with folks early. The compensation you talked about, sometimes we have to look at it and we're like, hey, there's fee splitting concerns here. And so there's a lot that goes into it that I never really had to deal with, like you said, in dental and vet and some of these other areas a little more traditional. I think you've spoken before, and I love how you say this, is that practice owners shouldn't go it alone. And I like, again, start with the end in mind and have a team, as I'm always on my soapbox. So I love that. What role does what Lux Med having a solid broker in place, like how does that help protect the seller's goals and avoid these costly mistakes?
I tell all of our sellers that you're at fundamental odds with the person across from the table. They want to buy you for the least amount of money that they think you're willing to accept. And you want to sell your practice for the most amount of money you think somebody's willing to pay for it. Right. And so that buyer on that side understands all the different levers that they can pull to make an offer look great, whether it's comp, whether it's multiple, and don't get me started on multiples. Multiples are figment of imagination, right? I can pull so many different levers. And if you think you want a 12X, I can make you get a 12X. But in reality, I'm going to go back and tell my LPs I bought it for a 6X.
Right.
Right. And so it really comes down to understanding the nuances and the details, and the devil's in the details. Right. And if you aren't familiar in this space of what all those nuances are, the buyer's always going to have the advantage. They're always going to be able to pull some lever that you didn't see, and it's going to make you feel warm and fuzzy about it. But eventually, at the end of the day, it's not going to be as good of a deal for you. And so the goal really is to put sellers in a competitive advantage. And whether that's us or any other advisory firm, you want to make sure that you are on equal footing with that person across the table from you. And that's where an advisor comes in and supports that. It's like real estate, right? Most people, 99% of the people are not going to go out and sell their house by themselves. They're going to hire a real estate agent, because the real estate agent understands the market. They understand who the buyers potentially are. And you start getting into, everybody loves a bidding war these days on houses, right? And so if I take the first offer that comes across the table because buyers are sending LOIs, I may be leaving a ton of money on the table. Just like in real estate, if I sold the house myself and somebody comes and gives me my asking price, I forgot about the person that's going to pay 200,000 over asking.
Yeah.
And so you want to make sure that you're in a competitive situation so that you can get the value for your business. And that's what an advisor does. Now, at the end of the day, I still tell everybody that it is still relationship first, price second. Understanding who that partner is, it's because you're getting married to that person at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And it's easier to get divorced in real life than it is in business. So once you sign that paperwork, you are married to that partner. And so you really want to make sure you've vetted that partner. You understand who you're getting in bed with at the end of the day, and making sure it's the right fit for you and what your goals are and what kind of outcome you want to see.
You told me this was one time we were speaking in prior conversation. You told me kind of a story, almost like anecdotally, that beyond valuation, I guess that played into it at the 11th hour, but a story of someone who hadn't engaged a group or anyone, kind of did it alone, right? I'm going to list my business and sell it. And there are some struggles there, for lack of a better term. Can you tell us a little bit about where the missteps were and what happened?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm glad you brought that up. We have a group that decided to go at it on their own, and they were sent an LOI in the mail. They signed it. They started negotiating, and that buyer wanted to introduce themselves to her team day one. So once that LOI was signed, hey, this is great. Let's celebrate. We're going to partner together. We're going to get the staff more money. We're going to bring on bonuses, better benefits, all of this stuff, and got really everybody amped up, including the seller. And so she introduced the buyer to the team, and they were going through negotiations with the team, putting new employment contracts together, all of this stuff that really should be done post signature of the final agreement. And what ultimately happened was at the last minute, really the last second, the buyer retraded the deal. As in, when I say retraded, they came in and said, hey, we don't value this at X, we value it at Y. And it's $1 million less than what our original offer was. And the seller was like, there's no way I can take that. And so ultimately she backed out of the deal. She then now is in the process of re-engaging her team because the team thought all this was happening. And usually nobody likes change, right? It's inevitable, but nobody likes change. And so they started down this change path and then had to do a complete course correction and go back to the way they were. And so if they had a broker, I would have said, I never let the buyers get introduced until that definitive agreement is signed and the ink is dry, right? And I would think you would tell them the same thing. They really want to get the hooks into everybody, which is great. And I love that. But let's do it after everything is done. And I would have told her, don't do it. Don't do it. There's so many different things that can pop up very last second that can kill a deal. And so you're better off kind of keeping that all in-house until that ink is dry on that paper. And so that affected multiples, that affected her team, that affected her. And so it just became this burden now that she has to deal with. And now that she's dealt with that, she says, okay, I still want to go to market. I want to find somebody that's going to help me find the right partner and somebody that is going to really support what I want to do and how I want to grow my business. And we are now going to help her do that. But it's one of those deals where you don't know what you don't know. And I think I was telling you earlier before we started the recording was most people only sell 1 to 2 businesses in their lifetime of their own, if they sell any, right? And so you only know what you know. There's so much that you don't know, and not having that expert. I was telling somebody actually this earlier today on a call that you've built a legacy, you've built a family. Why not do the due diligence to make sure that team is supported properly, that you know what all the options are out there on the table? Yes, your friend may have said, hey, join this group. I joined them. It's great. May not be great for you. It may be great for them. Maybe it's great for you. You don't know, right? Because you haven't tested the market. And you've really got to make sure that you go out there and see what's out there. Again, you figure out very quickly what you don't want. And I think that is just as valuable as figuring out what you want, because then you don't have to second guess yourself.
Really well said. And like, it's painful because when you told me that story, I could see the writing on the wall already where we were going. 100% agreed. Like, there's a process, right? And we want to get to a certain point, almost there with everything signed and buttoned up. And it's that now do your introductions and have the warm and fuzzy. Some groups call it a bear hug. And, it's this embrace of here's the buyer. But to do that early, everyone might be well intended, but until the deal's signed and inked, like, it can change. So let's pivot a little bit to talk about there's folks who maybe they're not yet ready to sell, or maybe, and you're advising them or they meet you early on. They're like, yeah, I'm thinking of selling 3-5 years down the road. And then there's also the folks who are like, Chris, I'm ready to go to market right now. And you might look at their practice and have to find a way to say, actually, doc, or actually, owner, maybe you're not quite ready. How do you advise those people? I guess in 2 scenarios. One is I'm thinking long term. I might want to do an exit. What should I do? And then conversely, they think they want to go to market now, but maybe they're not ready and maybe they've got to do some work. What does that look like?
Yeah. So I would say data is your friend here, right? And I would say, and I tell a lot of people, and this is when I was managing and running my DSO, my biggest thing was I manage based on data, not based on emotion. And so I want to know all the data that I can get my hands on and look at it and make sure I understand where I stand today, what my goal is in the future. And if the goal is to retire in 3 to 5 years, maybe now is the time to start looking at it, because a lot of these buyers are going to want a work back of 3 to 5 years, if not longer, right? They want the person that built the business, they want that founder and they want that excitement of that founder to stay on board. And so they like to put you in some sort of an agreement, long-term agreement, 3 to 5 years. And so if you want to retire in 5 years, then I would say, hey, now's the time to look at it. If you want to retire in 10 years, now is still potentially the time to look at it, Because to your point, there may be areas that you need to focus on to ensure that you're ready to go to market in a few years. And whether that's talking to Lux Med or talking to the Marti Law Group, there are a lot of avenues that can help you understand what you need to work on in order to get your business in a position to go to market. And one of those may be pulling out all the personal expenses, right? Making sure you don't have millions of dollars worth of adjustments built into there. Making sure that you've taken care of any, like if you're a plastic surgeon, making sure you have reduced any key man risk by bringing on associates, by bringing on different injectors, making sure that the staff is got the benefits that they need, making sure that there's all these different things that you can look at to make sure that the business is ready to go to market. Maybe you're big enough and you need to shift to accrual. This space is very big into prepaids, right? Prepaids typically sit on the balance sheet as a liability, not on the income statement.
Right.
And so learning and understanding what that looks like is also very important because a lot of these buyers, they do all their accounting on accrual, not on cash. And I'm sure a lot of people are rolling their eyes at me right now saying that. But those are very important things that if you're of the right size, you need to look at considering if you're preparing to go to market, because that's exactly what that buyer is going to do on the other end. And essentially, that's just giving you more leverage to lever up your offer because you've done all of these things to make sure that you are in a position, in the best position possible for that exit. And then to your point, the ones that are saying, hey, I'm ready to sell tomorrow and I want to retire tomorrow, those are the hard ones, right? Because maybe their business isn't in that position. They didn't do the legwork the last couple of years to get themselves in that position. And so their offers are either a lot lower or you have to talk to them and say, look, you're going to have to work for, I know you want to retire tomorrow, but nobody's buying a business where the main producer is exiting, especially like on a plastic side. I think a lot of those things are very important. The sooner you can get a valuation done, understand where those metrics are, really are very critical to kind of having that end goal in mind and making sure you're ready for that future sale.
I love it. It is always I think the toughest decision, like you said, is the doc or the owner who's like, yep, ready to go to market tomorrow. And you look under the hood and it's just a mess. And my finance degree is now 23 years old. So I'm like, listen, we got to bring in your CPA. We got to bring in your broker to tell you if you're really ready. But I can kind of give you a quick high level overview that, it feels like we've got to correct some things here. One of the things I could talk to you all day, man, about M&A and aesthetics or dental or plastic surgery. You mentioned Kyle Francis and the professional transition strategies. And I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss this because you guys have built something really cool, really proprietary that I'm obsessing over right now, which is Julia.ai, right? So can you talk a little bit about, I know it's a shift, but a little bit about what that is and what that means for potential sellers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think a great way to look at it is we as advisors want to make sure, and I've talked about this a lot, is that you want to make sure you find the right partner. And partnership is more important than, to me, money. Unless somebody's going to throw out a stupid number, then fine, you can take the stupid number. But most valuations are going to be very similar across all these groups, right? And so coming from my background on the dental side, partnership is always very important to me. And so what we've gone out and done is we've created the very first AI program that helps match buyers and sellers together based on a whole litany of criteria. It's actually the first AI tool within the M&A space across the entire US, across all M&A platforms. There's no other group out there. There's another group overseas that's doing it, but it's a proprietary software and a proprietary learning tool that we have that no other M&A advisory firm uses today. And really that goal, like I said, is to find, based on criteria, to match buyers and sellers together. And what we're finding already is we think we know. Let's say we've got a really very big group out there and we've got a ton of interested parties, but we've got this huge pool of thousands of private equity firms or groups. And so we may miss a couple, right? And so what Julia does is comes in and says, hey, don't forget about this one. And what we're finding now is that one that we're saying don't forget about, that Julia's saying don't forget about, actually is the best fit from a partnership standpoint. And it's really it's something that we use behind the scenes and that a seller or a buyer is not really going to see, but it really helps and makes sure that our clients are finding that right partnership And just it's another tool to ensure that you're getting the outcome and that you're happy on a long-term basis, not just once the cash hits your bank. And that AI tool has been very cool. And everybody that we internally loves it and uses it every day now. And the more we do it, the smarter it's getting. It's learning even more. And yeah, it's a very impressive tool and we're very excited about it.
It's awesome. Yeah, I love it. So yeah, like I said, I could talk to you all day about this stuff. I know you've probably got deals to make. And so where can folks learn more about you or reach you and start kicking the tires on if maybe their practice is ready?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say if you're receiving offers today via mail, email, mail, some people send a mail. I don't know who uses snail mail anymore, but via email, then I would say immediately reach out to broker. If you're ever even considering, reach out to me. You can go to our website, luxmedtransition.com, and fill out the contact us page, or you can just shoot me an email directly, shoot me a text. I'm sure, Justin, you'll put up all my contact information, but let us do a valuation. It's free. There's no obligation. We really lift the hood up and see how the business is doing. And we may end up saying, hey, this offer is way undervalued for what your business is doing. You need to go to market, find that right person. Or if you've already said, hey, I want to join this group and I don't want to join any other group, at least still allow us to do the valuation to make sure that you're getting the value for your business that you've built, right? We can still go back and help negotiate that and make sure that you're still getting the right amount of value. Even if you've decided, hey, this is the group I'm going to join no matter what, give us a chance. Let us do that valuation. There's no obligation. And it's a 20-page document. It gives you a lot of insight into the business, into your area of focus. And then we can come back with suggestions around you need to diversify a little bit in terms of services offerings, or you need to increase some different service offerings, whatever it may be. So we look at not only the financial aspect, but we also look at the operational. We pull a lot of EMR reports. Like I said, you can go to our website, go to contact us, and that just comes to me directly. But if you're getting offers in the mail, don't go at it alone. I've been there. I've bought practices on my own, and I'm always getting them at a deal. I can tell you, at least give us a shot. Let us do that valuation for you. There's no obligation, and it's yours to keep no matter what you decide to do.
I think the valuation part is so, for lack of a better term, valuable because as a former seller, right, having a group and I thought my business was worth way more than it was. And I think that's sadly, a common theme we see with a lot of sellers. So doing that valuation early, like you said, for people out there, I can't tell you the valuations can be pretty pricey. So getting something done with Chris and his team, knowing where you're at, and hey, if the value is not what you want today, great. Now you've got a couple year runway, let's say, and you can fix things up and you go back and do it again, and maybe the value's where you want it to be.
And I would also add that, hey, look, if you're going to go get a valuation done, make sure it's done by a group that understands this space. Because just going to your CPA or your accountant and saying, hey, do a valuation, there's a lot that they don't necessarily know about this space and the way that the market is trending. And so there may be certain adjustments that aren't made properly or things that aren't looked at correctly just because they don't know the space. So make sure you're going to a group like Lux Med that is very niche and that's all we do in this space. And so we know all those nuances to make sure we're creating the best valuation for your business and a true understanding of what it's worth.
Excellent. Excellent. I love it. So thanks, Chris, again for the time. Chris Hubble with Lux Med. And yeah, we've got a couple deals going together right now. So I can attest to the fact that Chris and his team are top notch. So really grateful for the time. I kept you probably a little longer than we thought. I had to take advantage of getting you. If folks want to get Chris, we'll throw up the contact information on the different social platforms and you can track them down. But yeah, thanks again, man. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, really appreciate it, Justin. Thanks for the time.